Facebook, YouTube, the universe. So it seems nowadays. Technology, isn't it great? We have the ability to be in multiple places at the same time. And speaking of multiple places at the same time, I am going to introduce you to no one other than the man, the legend, and probably the one who embodies that phrase the most, Steve Fretzin. Steve is the owner of what Be That Lawyer is your
Yeah, be
company?
that lawyer's the deal.
Okay. Be That Lawyer. Steve is also multi-author, you know, Amazon best-selling author of Sales Free Selling, which is one of your first books that I read, Steve, and I learned a lot about, the process of interacting, in the legal space and generating business for law firms. And then, of course, you have your newest project. Can you move over to the side so we can see all the lovely folks behind you? I saw you making quite a bit of noise online. Well, I shouldn't even say you. Other individuals were sharing your latest book, which you interviewed all of these rainmakers. I think 101. I didn't quite make the list, but maybe I'll make number two. So
Well,
can we do it?
like we were talking about before, you're not a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, so
Yeah.
we're eliminated from being in the book apparently.
I see. Yes, by process of elimination.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how it goes. But Steve, I really appreciate you coming on today. I'm just going to give a couple quick things, announcements for those watching, because I've learned from the back in my days in the Sandler training world, an upfront contract is one of the things that's good to do. So I'm going to tell you what you're in for today. This will be we try to keep it to 20, but if the conversation goes a little bit longer, we will. Minute conversation on the critical components required to generate business in a legal setting for law firms and attorneys. So I'm the CEO of Paragon Tech. I run a legal tech consultancy that focuses on arming lawyers with the best possible information so that they can ultimately decide on how to get the best out of their case management systems, their document management systems. Essentially, we want to create efficiency, and we do that through employing technology. So I'm going to bring that lens and that perspective to the conversation. And of course, Steve focuses on all of the tactics and the strategies around actually generating business for law firms and attorneys. I know we've interacted quite a bit over the years, and I've seen Steve post various pieces of thought leadership content online that really resonated with me, and have actually helped to break some of the limiting beliefs that some of my clients have had, where Steve wasn't even working with them directly, but I was just able to share some of his posts and things, especially around areas like requesting referrals, which is sort of we're just coming off Halloween and spooky season. That might be one of the spookiest activities for many attorneys out there. So Steve, maybe we should define first before we jump in, how do you define business development?
Well, we can call it sales, but I think it's just easier to call it business development so we don't lose everybody right away, because nobody loves sales, but people seem to like business development. Some call it marketing because that's easier than business development, but I define it as really the ability to develop relationships and trust that leads to new clients and how we solve problems for people. So, where sales is really selling, convincing, and trying to, push someone into something that you have that you have an agenda about. The way that I'm teaching business development is really how do we, network effectively and develop strong relationships and ultimately walk a buyer through a buying decision to identify fit, identify a win-win outcome, and continue to move people forward if they're a good fit. And if they're not, for a number of reasons, they're not qualified or whatever, how do we stay friends, keep the relationship? It's a no or it's a no for now, and move it on and save us that time and that aggravation of chasing after people who aren't really doing it. So there's business development is a learned skill. I know that there's people that have personalities like you, Jay, that can just go out and make friends and everybody loves you. But you also can appreciate the fact that if you can take that personality and combine it with process and systems. You mentioned Sandler. I've got my own sales free selling model. Whatever the case is, following a process or a system is always going to produce better than winging it, especially for people who maybe don't have quite the outgoing personality that you and I may have.
So I think you brought up a great point. And by the way, for everyone watching here, this is not a session where we're going to, we're here, and the through line here is that we're on a search for truth. So regardless of whether that means, like, Steve might say things that conflict with my viewpoint, I will certainly say things that conflict with Steve's viewpoint.
Well, remains to be
He's been in the
seen.
game quite a lot longer, but we're searching for truth here. So I think it's the point you just brought up is interesting, because I remember when we were first introduced to each other, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I read your book, Sales Free Selling, and it automatically caused me to think about the fact that there are so many methodologies, and this has been emphasized to me and demonstrated in various ways over the last 12 years that I've been in business, but there are so many ways that we can acquire new business, right? And not all of those are applicable to legal because of course ethical rules, but I'm just gonna, go through the list. We have, cold outreach, right? We have the ability to network and create strategic referrals and relationships. We can belong to special interest or affinity groups. We can rely on existing clients referring us to new clients. We can do all of these things, right? And that just scratches the surface. You can create a newsletter. You can create, a community and then provide thought leadership content. There's so many ways that we can go out there and get in front of the right people. So it started to make me think when I read your book, I'm like, are certain methods truly better than others? Or does it depend on the individual situation and, how they're positioned in the marketplace, potentially their practice area, potentially, their unique abilities? Like, do you believe that there's one better model than another?
There are better models than others, and there's also a good model will be flexible. I'm teaching people a system, and every client I work with, introvert, extrovert, personal injury versus patent attorney, whatever it might be, we have to be flexible in their personality and their comfort and their approach, and how we tweak and maneuver the system so that it's going to work best for them. Right? Some people are selling to, or building relationships is maybe a better way to put it, to like referral sources that feed them the work. They don't deal with the end user until they're being referred. There's other people that need to get in and meet GCs and meet CEOs, and they've got to get in there, and how do they get in the door? So everybody's got a different way, and I think a good system is flexible to accommodate the people that need accommodation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly an element of systems that helps to produce the desired outcome. I mean, the way I look at systems is like you mentioned earlier. You said you have this. You made the comment that I have this sort of personality where I can go in the room and make friends with folks. And I would imagine that you probably understand this because I'm going to go out on a limb and say you probably did the same thing, knowing that the ability to connect with others is so important to me. It's something that I train regularly. Like I've sought out content online. I've paid and subscribed to masterminds and joined groups and Toastmasters. I mean, I've done all of these things because honestly, as a sort of when I was in my early foundational moments in starting my business, I realized that I actually lacked those skills. I was naturally actually very shy. I remember I have this cousin Christoph, and him and I were just talking this weekend about the fact that like growing up, he's 5 years older than I am, right? I'm 31, he's 36. And I remember growing up, he was always like the funniest one. And he was always the one who was like in the spotlight. And I remember being like, oh man, I wish I could just be like Christoph. It comes so naturally to him. And it turns out, like we're talking a couple weekends ago, and he was telling me he suffered from the same thing, which is he always felt inadequately shy. He didn't feel like he was up to that he fit the standard that he measured himself by. So he worked on that. Like he would go and force himself to go out and just like go to the mall and talk to girls. Why? Because it helped him to sort of build his skill set and get familiar, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
He's building the muscle
Yeah.
memory, right? I mean, why do we work out? Why do you work? I know you work out a lot. Like we're trying to build something up, and a skill is no different. You have to make a souffle, 20 times before it tastes as good as it's going to taste or whatever. And business development isn't that different. We have to consider that, wherever we are, wherever we have to start, becoming a student of the game of business development, reading, watching, listening, podcasting, whatever it is, wherever you are today is where you have to start. And you either decide that you're going to work out and be healthy, or you're going to start listening, watching, and learning business development and start playing in that game and getting prepared for, as an associate, maybe for partnership and all that. It's just a matter of when, but everybody at some point is going to figure out staying healthy is a good thing. And by the way, business development allows you to make more money and have more freedom in your career. They're both very positive things, but you have to kind of start where you are. You're not going to be the same after, right? When you lose 30 pounds and you're buff, you're not the same as when you were, before. We all have to transform and improve over time and through our lives. I mean, that's the beauty of living a life, is watching that transformation happen and having difficulties that we overcome and we improve and we make mistakes, right? We wing it for 10 years when we should have gotten coaching, a year in or whatever it is. These are mistakes that we learn from. And I have lawyers coming to me in their mid 50s, and after working with me for even a couple months are like, I can't believe I didn't do this when I was in my mid 30s. I can't even believe where I would be. But those were decisions made at the time. So it's where you start. But just start.
Yeah, and I know some of those folks. Like, I know I've seen Neil Dishman on your program, and he talks about. I mean, he raves about the experience of working with you and sort of just unlocking those capabilities that were within, but just needed to be coaxed out. Now, let me ask you one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear, and this is timely because I just had a conversation with Mike Whalen. He's a sort of a tech journalist and as well as a lawyer. He's a contractor for Spellbook, and he writes a lot of their content. And one of the things that Mike mentioned was that he turned me on to this guy, David Baker. And David Baker wrote a book called The Business of Expertise. And essentially he talks about the process of gaining expertise in a particular area. I'm like, if I miss the central theme, I'm like halfway through the book. So you'll have to give me a little bit of grace here. But what I'm learning is that the process of gaining expertise is not something that is earned once. It is something that's earned continually. Right. So like, just as I forget the case, but there's a sort of landmark case that defined the standard for determining experthood in court proceedings. Right.
Yeah.
The standard used to be, well, you've been a family medicine practitioner for 30 years, therefore you're an expert. But now, in this case, changed that standard. It's like we have to sort of introduce a scientific method in the process. And I need to see your method so that I can understand, and then ultimately you can tell the jury that you're an expert, and we'll consider you one. So the fallacy that I've seen is that lawyers will tell me, and I've got clients who tell me this, I've got prospective individuals who tell me this: if I simply do good work, then everything else will follow. And I'm sure you've heard that quite often. Yeah. So I wonder, sort of, I'm seeing the link being, when you're running a law firm, especially if you're solo, you're the practitioner and you're the business development representative. So you're responsible for gaining expertise and potentially communicating that expertise to the world in order to generate new business. But also you have to then work on the cases. So how do you prioritize and inform your clients on how they should structure their time around those expertise building activities and the actual practice of going out and developing their business?
I feel like you asked like 3 questions before the last question. Like I was coming up with answers in my head for these other questions, and then you skipped and you went to the last question.
Steve, I'd like to introduce you to unmedicated ADHD.
Hey, me too. All right, it's a good club. We figure shit out, right?
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, there's ways to do things efficiently, and there's ways to do things inefficiently. If I want to be a great chef, and I'm going to make a wonderful meal, I know that there's some planning and there's some process and there's some things I need to do to execute and follow through on that dinner presentation or whatever it might be. And I think for lawyers that are interested in rainmaking and business development, we have to look at it the same way, that there's a plan that needs to be in place to identify where you should be spending your time so that you're putting it in the right places with the right people doing the right things. If you're just out doing random acts of business development and marketing, and that's, I'm going to attend this conference and this networking event and join here and this board and that board, and I'm going to write for here and do that, like you're going to just blow through, hundreds of hours of time doing that stuff. So having a plan, number one. Number two is, we talked about systems. People that have systems for how they do business development, how they do marketing, how they automate, right? Like automate through things you could help them with, and delegate and find how they're going to get the most out of their day as a learned skill and as something that they're going to work on and not just overlook and just say, I'll do it myself. It's just easier that way. And then the day has them instead of them having the day. The other piece that's missing, and people don't recognize this very often, but need to, is that life and business development, it's all about performance improvement. And here's an example. I have a client, let's say it's Dishman. I know he would be the first to tell you this. And this is one of the things he said on my podcast recently. We did a Be That Lawyer Live, and he said this exact thing. He said that he would go out and he would have all these amazing meetings. And he would walk away like, I'm the man. They're going to hire me and no questions asked. And he wouldn't get them. And then he'd chase after him and he wouldn't hear back. He was dealing with the wrong decision maker. He just didn't know that. So once we started identifying that he was dealing with HR instead of dealing with the GC or the head of HR, the people that could actually sign off on working with his firm and with him, that it made a huge switch for him. And he's like, I think I just enjoyed working and talking with the HR people and not so much the decision makers. It was just easier to do it that way. But ultimately, he needed to learn something and improve something to then make something repetitive that works, right? So planning, process, performance improvement. I don't care if you're playing guitar, learning a language, kung fu, whatever it is. If you have a plan and you have process and you have a way of improving performance over time, you're going to excel. And I don't think lawyers take the time to do any of those well. And that's kind of problematic as far as how do we make the best use of our time and get the most out of our careers if we're not doing those three things.
I mean, you said something key there that I think I just want to highlight it. I don't want to gloss over it, which is the fact that you mentioned that oftentimes, or at least in this scenario, you found that there was an activity that was being done because, like in this particular scenario, Neil liked talking with the HR representatives rather than the individuals above them who could actually make the decisions. I found this for myself, which is that oftentimes we don't take enough time to really identify what the limiting constraint is in our business. We solve for the thing we like doing the most, and ultimately that might not be the thing that will move the business forward.
Yeah.
It's the same from a business development front. There may be certain professional networking organizations that you enjoy more than others, but maybe there's the right people, the right eyeballs, the right connections that will be made in another area, right? This happens from technology standpoint. Let's look at AI currently. There's so many tools to be enamored by. Oftentimes firms get sort of pulled in by the novelty of one tool versus another instead of solving an actual constraint that their business has, right? Like I had a firm who, when they looked at their billings, like it was something like 60% of all of their bills that had a particular time entry relating to drafting discovery requests, the clients would ask for write-offs on. So that was a limiting constraint within the business. They still needed to do that activity because ultimately they would take that timeline of discovery items and then they would use that to draft their motion to compel. So they still needed to do it, but clients weren't ultimately paying for it. And it wasn't until their CFO with a keen eye saw that, okay, wait, we're billing for this activity, but we're not realizing it on the final bill.
Yeah.
So in that particular case, it made sense to implement an automation to help them draft the timeline so that they could do it in a time frame that the client was actually willing to pay for. Again, it's sort of the blocking and tackling. It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. It requires looking at large volumes of data, but those are things that actually move the firm forward. So I wonder from the perspective of business development, do you see firms or individual attorneys, because I know you'll work with, individual contributors as well as firms as a whole, do you see things that lawyers typically tend to get wrong because they simply enjoy one type of business development activity more than another?
Yeah, 100%. And the saying goes, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. And lawyers really are challenged by being introspective on what they're doing and what it's producing. They're not tracking it. They're not looking at the numbers and the data. And again, I had a client, for example, who for 5 years prepared and spent an exorbitant amount of time to present to a room full of lawyers that were all of his competition for the ABA. Great. Except for 5 years, you're getting no business and you're sharing all your best secrets. So, he hadn't identified his targets and where he should be investing his time. He wasn't looking at low-hanging fruit and where that business is. And so one of the things that I do right away when I meet an attorney, like in 30 minutes, it's like 30 minutes or less and you get the pizza, is I can sit down with any attorney in 30 minutes and I can ask them about what they've been up to, how it's producing. And then I asked this question, and this question resolves a lot of the issues. It's with regards to business development, what are your top challenges, frustrations, and concerns? And the next thing you know, I look down and I've got somewhere between 4 and 7 things written down. Don't have a plan, don't I have a personal brand, not using or leveraging LinkedIn properly, not getting in front of enough decision makers. I'm getting the deals I'm working on are too small, the clients are too small. I don't have a good process for keeping in touch with people and following up, and the list goes on and on and on. And what that does is it allows me to really understand, where the improvements can be made. It's like if you look at their IT and you see that they're doing everything without automation and everything manual and all this stuff, and all you're thinking in your head is bubbling up. I'm going to make this firm a lot of money, because the way they're doing it and the way they should be doing it are completely different. And so that's where guys like you and I and other professionals can come in and see things that others just can't see. And I've got lawyers that are doing multi-million-dollar books of business, and they've generated it on great lawyering, luck, being in the right place at the right time, murdered their partner to get it. No, I'm just kidding. But, like they fell into it, or they earned it because they just hustled. But in that hustle, they didn't realize how much time they were wasting and how much more meat on the bone there is, but they just don't know. It's like, this is a stupid analogy, but like there's a table in front of them and it's loaded to the sky with dollars and bills, and they're walking around it all day and not even realizing it. So that's where I think, again, they're just spending time on things they enjoy or things that are easy, or just doing the law instead of like the things that might be challenging. But even the things that are challenging, Jay, can be made easier through a system and through language and through, like, people that you mentioned at the beginning, like about asking for introductions. I've got a gift of being able to give lawyers language that allows them to ask for introductions, that gets the introductions, and it doesn't come across salesy at all. What's that worth to a lawyer who has gone the last 10 years without asking any clients for introductions, just because they didn't have the appropriate process and language to do it? I mean, Steve, that could be $1 million right there.
I've sent you clients of mine who are like, hey, look, we're efficient, but they just need to now increase their pipeline so they can take advantage of the newfound efficiency. And I've mentioned to them, hey, are you asking for referrals after each successful matter? No, I'm not. I've sent you those clients, and it's like, because they have this natural sort of trepidation of actually asking for that referral. But like you mentioned, there's a way to do it that feels organic, that feels natural. And ultimately, the way I try to, think for even my own practice is that I believe that we're the best option out there. I believe that by taking my unique skills and my experience and my staff, and the fact that we've worked with these case management systems and we understand how law firms operate and how to set up their task flows and procedures, I think it's a moral obligation. If I've done a good job for one firm, I want to know who the people that they care about, maybe another attorney or a law firm owner that they know who might be struggling with the same issue. And to me, if I'm leaving that on the table, then this person's not being served. And it's the same with legal services. If you help someone with a personal injury matter and we're able to get them a recovery and get them some relief and get the family closure, why would you not want to also get those services in front of as many other people out there that are struggling from the same issue? It's just, it feels, because we're, of course, we run for-profit organizations, which any law firm is. And just because there's that monetary, we're enriched monetarily, that's what I think makes it sort of feel, like you said, salesy.
Yeah. The, ultimately, Jay, I know how people feel about you. They talk about you and they know you're great and they know you're smart and they know that you have solutions. The other side of it is that they really feel a connection to you. And I think if lawyers can think about, yes, we provide great service and quality, but what else are we doing for our clients? What other value are we driving? How are we connecting them? How are we building a social relationship? My father, Larry the lawyer, the late great Larry the lawyer, I talk about him on my podcast all the time, but he had a client who died, actually crazy story, playing polo in the championship game, scored a goal and died on the horse. And in his will and whatever, had asked my father to do his eulogy, his lawyer to do his eulogy. So, what had my father done for this guy, I think made him very rich, and also was more than a lawyer. I think he was a very sophisticated advisor, business advisor for this gentleman. And I think we need to consider as professional service practitioners that we need to go above and beyond, build a relationship, and add so much value that when it comes time where they think of us to just provide the referral, and if they're not thinking strategically like that, that we're in a position to ask for one in a very nice way where they can't wait to refer you because they know how great you are, and they know how they feel about you, and they want to share that with someone else. Like if I knew the greatest handyman in the world that had come in and just fixed everything, was on time, was affordable, was like perfect in every way. Yeah, I mean, other than having enough time to continue to come into my house, I would love to refer that, because that's going to come back to me as, I can't believe you shared this person, because they're amazing and they're so appreciative that I did that. And that's how we all want to feel, is that we are highly referable.
Absolutely. So to close out here, I'd like for you to, in that theme of being highly referable, what are some of the top strategies or tips that you could provide for the attorney who wants to position themselves as highly referable? And then I'll share some of my own as well, and we'll wrap
Yeah,
things up.
absolutely. So, um, covered this a little bit, but I think it comes back to, are you a great lawyer? I think that's where it starts. And those are sort of table stakes, that you're responsive, great quality, great service, you get good results for your clients. You may not win every time, but they know you did everything you could to step up for them. The second part is, what else are you doing for them, right? So inviting them on a podcast, inviting them to be on a panel, including them in a social, taking them to a game. They need a new assistant GC? Are you helping to fill that role through your network and through your firm, right? How are you doing all of those things and developing not only client loyalty, where people aren't going to leave you, but are willing and able to refer you on a moment's notice? And I think these are all learned skills. These are not things people are born with. Nobody, no matter what you think, people aren't born knowing these things to do. Some people just have more, moxie and courage than others. But if we have process and we have systems, and then we try it, as scary as it might be, and we get the proof and evidence that what we just did worked, and then we take ownership that, hey, if I do that again, it'll probably work the same way, and it does, and now you're on a track that you never thought you would be, but it's highly effective. So I think most lawyers just need to be a student of the game and understand that there are better ways to do things. You just need to continue to learn what you don't know.
The expanding circle of ignorance, they call it, I think, where it's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And that's a great place to be in, because it allows you to humble yourself and be a student of the game. Great segue, Steve. You did this perfectly. I don't know if you read my mind, but I love how you talk about systems, because to me, systems has been the key for my scalability and my growth of my firm, but also helping to create scalability and growth within the law firms that we support. A system allows you to take your best client experience and deconstruct it so that you can create those conditions every time. And like, one of the easiest ways to become referable is to do good work and to create proof that you are who you say you are to yourself. Because imagine how much more confidently you come across to the client when you know you have a track record of delivering those results. Those results tend to happen. You can luck your way into it, like you mentioned, Steve. But if you want to make those results consistently happen, it's by having systems, processes, and procedures. And then once you have those documented, written procedures and processes, you can then take that and you can use technology to automate those steps and to create those reminders and task lists and workflows. And ultimately, what you're trying to create is a system for delivering your legal services in the most efficient way possible. So, as I always tell people, success comes from, so there's Outlook calling me, but success comes from intention, not imitation. So I think we covered a lot of ground here, Steve, but I appreciate you coming on and and being willing to voice these the views that you have on the topic of business development. I think it's important, and folks out there, especially in the legal profession, would benefit greatly from being able to become that highly referable lawyer. So, Steve, before we jump off, just quickly let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, easiest way to find me is you can email me at steve@fretzin.com. You can go to bethatlawyer.com, and I am all over LinkedIn all the time, every day. So trying to today I put out something about giving away free books. So if anybody's interested, and I've written 5 books, if you want any of the ebooks or you want all 5, let me know. Just email me or in-mail me or whatever, and I'll shoot them out. But trying to just help the legal profession be the best it can be and help lawyers live their best lawyer lives.
I want to say, I think I have,
You got some hanging out back there?
yeah, I might have some of your stuff. Like, I mean, Steve makes good stuff. I mean,
There
who's
we
that
go.
guy? Does anybody recognize him?
There we go.
So,
Look at that thing.
seriously, like, this isn't by chance. Like,
That's so funny.
I have, you can't see my bookcase there, but no, Steve makes some really good stuff. So he's not a fluff writer. He doesn't do it just to get on the Amazon bestseller list, even though he's on there, right? But make sure you follow him. And of course, if you want additional tips and tricks about leveraging your legal technology, make sure to follow me, Jay McAllister, on LinkedIn. I'm most active on YouTube, though. This is a sort of an area that we've been putting a lot of intention and focus into this year. So we have a huge library and growing of content, program tutorials and software reviews, as well as guides on how to leverage your technology best. So Paragon Tech on YouTube. All right, that'll do it for today. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.